Coming up on Network Africa. Rescuers in Kenya search for 15 people after a 7-story building collapses in the capital, Nairobi. The Moroccan government announces plans to send food aid to Qatar as the diplomatic row with its Gulf neighbors continues. And youth unemployment rises in recession hits South Africa. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin today in East Africa, where several people are missing in Kenya after a 7-story building collapsed yesterday night in an eastern suburb of the capital, Nairobi. The Kenya Red Cross says response teams are at the scene. Dozens of people were reportedly evacuated from the Kware Pipeline Embakasi area moments before the collapse. Some witnesses say the building had been condemned after cracks appeared on its walls. This comes almost 2 months after a similar incident occurred in April 2017. Talking about diplomatic relations, the Moroccan government says it's sending a plane load of food to Qatar, which has been isolated by transport restrictions imposed by its Gulf neighbors. The Moroccan Foreign Ministry says in a statement that the move is only humanitarian and unrelated to the political dispute over Doha's alleged links to terrorism. Earlier, the King of Morocco, Mohammed VI, offered to mediate between the parties. Last week, Morocco also suspended flights to and from Doha. Qatar relies on imports for most of its food. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has opened the G20 Africa Partnership Conference in Berlin. The 2-day summit brings together heads of states, ministers, NGOs and business representatives from a group of 20 in African countries under the motto, Investing in a Common Future. Speaking at the opening of the conference, Mrs. Merkel says working together to promote development in Africa is crucial to ensuring the positive development of the world as a whole.
We know
that the world will not be able to develop in a good way unless all continents are part of that development. And of course, that means, above all, that in the coming years, the African continent must continue its development and become more dynamic. For many years, politicians working in development have not paid enough attention to the issue of security. For many years, we felt good if we did not concern ourselves with military build-up. But some of you have said to me, what are we supposed to do? On the one hand, we are supposed to fight terrorism, but on the other hand, we do not get any support from you in this regard. I think we have to be honest and say development can only occur in places where security is ensured. If the lack of hope is too great in Africa, then of course there will be young people who believe they have to seek a new life somewhere else in the world. So if we work together with you to help your countries, then we also create more security for ourselves and we can put a stop to people illegally profiting from the fate of others. Well, that line is clearer now. We have Teddy Otieno joining us live from Nairobi to talk about the building collapse in Kenya. Thank you for spending time with us on the program. I asked you before, what can you tell us about this tragedy in the Kenyan capital?
Well, fact is that the accident happened at around 10 p.m., that is East African time. And it happened in a place called Kware, that is the locality. But then the famous name for the area is the Pipeline area, which is in the capital, Nairobi. Now, 121 people were accounted for, I think, about early in the morning, but then 15 are still missing because it is alleged that some people went back to the house to try and get their belongings. So a mother and 3 children are actually among the missing. So the search and rescue operations are still ongoing because it was quite it was actually an 8-story building. So it's actually given a difficult time to actually be able to just unravel the rubble.
What are the preliminary investigations saying? Are the owners of this building likely to face prosecution?
Well, they're likely to face prosecution because you do remember it's actually barely a year after such a tragedy happened in the capital. So far, the governor, the Nairobi governor, Evans Kidero, Dr. Evans Kidero actually visited the site and warned rogue landlords and contractors of government action once investigations are complete, because currently they're saying they're handling 1,000+ cases of such standard buildings in the capital, but then he actually revealed that up to 30,000 more are still facing probe, and most of them are actually going to be demolished. He also announced that that particular fateful building was actually earmarked for demolition, but what happened is that there was some little bit of logistical challenges, if I may use that term, so that actually hindered them from accessing the building, and then in terms of clearance from the county directive, also took time. So that's what the governor gave in the morning. But then ideally, the owners are likely to face prosecution. Over to you.
It seems, Teddy, that this kind of disaster is becoming quite frequent in Kenya. What's the government doing to prevent a recurrence?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, of course, there are steps to mitigate such crises from occurring or reoccurring, if I may say that, because it comes barely a year after about 50 people died in Huruma, which is just adjacent to pipeline area. It's not quite far from pipeline. It's barely 20 kilometers away. And of course, if you remember, in the same year, 21 people died when a 6-story building collapsed. So it is true that this particular tragedy is quite frequent in the country. 2017, this year, 49 people died in the capital as well due to such substandard constructions. And of course, the government is actually working towards it. There's 30,000 cases currently pending. And of course, we all be waiting to see how the government is going to work on this particular one. But then ideally, there are mitigations just to ensure that rogue, contractors and landlords who just wish to increase the number of rooms in their buildings are actually put to book. Over to you.
What's the housing situation like in Kenya? And this is on a final note. It seems people kind of have no choice but to rent houses. They often, they may find is defective, but they have no choice but to go in there. Well,
these are housing prices in Kenya currently. If I could give an example of the capital, basic necessities such as the supply of water, electricity, such things are actually crippling the economy of the country. And just to give you a clear picture of what's going on right now is that we have people coming up with buildings as high as 7 and 8 stories, and these are actually in the slum areas of the city. So what happens is many people would actually go for such rentals because, one,